This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, technology, international news, politics, health, anything that affects our lives, any of the stories that we go through during the week, and we take a look at them from a higher perspective. And by a higher perspective, I'm talking about a metaphysical perspective or a spiritual perspective. One in which we get past the button-pushing elements of the news stories of the day, things that make us either feel despair or fear or even for a short time maybe make us feel good or happy or careless at least. Those things that play on our fears and emotions and that are used rather artfully by the media to get our attention, because the media needs our attention to support it through its advertising dollars. So ratings require getting an audience to pay attention, at least for a few minutes. And that's the rather insidious thing in some ways about how our media has developed over the years, is that they really only need your attention for a few minutes. Enough to say this many people watched this and therefore we can charge this amount of advertising dollars. They're not interested in giving you, well, particularly as we're talking about news or traditional news media, they're not interested in really giving you information. They are interested in getting you to watch and providing you with enough stimulating titillation that you will sit like good doggies in front of the screen, at least for a little while. So when we've had to be exposed to these sorts of things, which can cause us to be, anxious in distress, or otherwise just really feeling like the world is an untenable place to be, we take that step back and we take a look at how we are creating everything that is around us, including these stories that at first might feel difficult or cause you distress. When we remember we're creating it all, and we're creating it all for a reason, to have these experiences. Because we are divine mind in our highest self, and here's where the metaphysics part comes in. In our highest self, we are powerful beyond measure. We are indestructible. We are creators. And we do not live in fear. We have no fear. There's nothing to fear. But in order to have these experiences, we create what you might think of as, holographic scenarios in which we pretend to be less than who we really are. We give ourselves a character or an avatar that we come to believe is us. That includes certain limitations of maybe strength or insight or advantages or money or whatever it is that makes the game interesting, thrilling, and somewhat, in some ways, a bit anxiety provoking to play. But we're here to play those games. And not to be cavalier about it. I mean, it's for lack of a better word that I use the word holographic games. People may think that's a little bit flippant. It's not. Games are serious business. Just walk into any preschool or kindergarten and watch what the kids are doing when they're playing. It's serious business. You know, sports games, that we watch on television, football, baseball, whatnot. Very serious games. People's livelihoods depend on them. For children, they are learning enormous amounts of social, emotional, and cognitive skills by playing games. And on a much broader level, that's what we're doing here. That's my opinion, my belief. On Earth. So, that is my take and approach on looking at news stories from the higher perspective. Last week on our show, we talked about medication and wellness in the transition era. And the transition era, for those of you who haven't tuned into this show before, the transition era is what I'm calling this period of time we are going through, a time when we are in transition in so many areas of our life, from money to politics to race relations to wars in the Middle East. Everything is in transition. Seeds have been planted for enormous growth in social and human evolution, if you will. But it is what the Germans call a Sturm und Drang approach. It's a push-pull kind of thing. As things evolve, there's an almost equal pullback that comes out of fear and terror. I mean, there's a very strong reason why terrorism and terrorists are a main character in our era at this point in time. Terror is the thing that pulls us back from the transitions, from the changes that we need. So in any case, and I've gone into the astrological reasons I call this the transition era, but I won't get into that today because we're running a little short on time and I've got a lot to get into. So just suffice it to say that this is an era in which everything is changing, but most importantly, what is changing is the way we see the world. Our awareness is expanding, and as our awareness expands, things change in equal level to it. So in last week's show, I was talking about medication and the proliferation of, prescription pain meds that are very powerful, so powerful that people who are prescribed them for, important reasons, they've had an operation, they're in pain, they're in physical pain. And so what doctors know to do is prescribe these very powerful drugs. Well, before you know it, some people find themselves addicted to these powerful drugs. Why? Because they feel better than they've felt before. You see, these drugs don't just eliminate pain. physical pain. Because physical pain has an emotional, psychological component to it. So these drugs also free you from emotional pain in many ways. And that's the addictive part of it. That's the addictive part. If these pain medications worked only to alleviate the physical pain, once that physical pain is under control and no longer a problem, which just about all physical pain, except for certain chronic conditions, eventually subsides in one way or another. Once those physical aches and pains went away, you'd have no need for the drug, and you'd have no interest in taking it. But it's not just the physical pain that it alleviates. It alleviates what's underneath or underlying physical pain, which is emotional distress, emotional pain, which in our society we have not learned to incorporate or process well. Because we're still, in many ways, in traditional medicine, looking at things as from the separatist point of view. Those are emotional problems, those are physical problems, and the two do not have any connection. That is how our traditional view of the world has been. We are changing that as we find out that is not the truth. More and more we do know that's not the truth. But still, we rely on those old conditionings that we have, and we don't realize that much of our physical pain is caused from our emotional or, if you will, spiritual distress. And it can be alleviated by working through those. So what I want to talk about today is happiness. Because I believe in our society, as I mentioned at the end of last week's show, I believe we are a society that doesn't know how to be happy, or even what it means to be happy. And I think more and more as we become isolated and our belief in false ideas, consumes us, the further we get away from understanding what happiness is, until something, if you're lucky, something or someone pushes you out of that, and you have a breakthrough, or you begin to realize that there are better ways to manage what appears to be pain, which is, by the way, an illusion, and that there are ways to be happy no matter what seems to be going on in your hologram or your everyday physical world. And that happiness comes from the understanding, as I opened the show with, of the fact that these are illusions that you are creating. So I'm going to talk about, and in particular, I'm going to talk about the happiest countries in the world. A man who is called the happiest man in the world. He's a Buddhist monk by the name of Matthew Ricard. We've talked about him on the show before, but it's been quite a few years, so it's good to bring him back into the fold. And we're going to talk about mindfulness meditation, because these are the things that can help you to be healthy and pain-free and keep you away from painkillers, which can ultimately not only kill the pain, but kill you in the process. Or even if it doesn't kill the physical you or your body, it numbs you to the point where, the essence of you has been, for all intents and purposes, quelled, quenched, killed. Okay, so being happy and healthy. So I want to start with this. This is an article from Dr. Andrew Weil on his website. And he looks at a group of Harvard researchers who have for 75 years been tracking a group of graduates from that university in an attempt to learn what makes them happy and healthy. Then there's another Harvard team that focused on a different group, young men from poor Boston neighborhoods who managed to stay out of trouble despite coming from the kinds of homes that often produce delinquents. And over the years, the two groups melded. And so far, the study has concluded that alcohol was a primary contributor to divorce, that alcohol abuse often precedes depression rather than depression leading to drinking, which was the prevailing thought for quite some time, that drinking, people would drink to excess to relieve depression, and that may be, but alcohol being a depressant in and of itself apparently can cause depression. So, I mean, alcohol, talking about painkillers, well, alcohol is the most commonly used one, isn't it? Right? Because when you think about getting a drink or going to have, an alcoholic beverage, what motivates that? Right? You've had a long day and you want to relax and feel good. That's pain relief. Anyway, let me not get too far off this topic in this article. So the study concluded alcohol was the primary contributor to depression, to divorce, that not smoking is the best way to promote healthy aging, and that actually people who had a liberal point of view had longer and more active sex lives than conservatives. That's interesting. But the most important thing the study seems to show, according to Dr. Weil, is that the most consistent positive influence on health and well-being is the strength of relationships with friends and family, and in particular with spouses. In fact, it found that people with the strongest family relationships were least likely to develop chronic diseases, mental illness, or memory problems. That goes for people who cultivated other relationships too, those who maintain ties outside the home with colleagues at work or friendships formed after retirement. So what Dr. Weil sees, and what this research seems to back up, is that meaningful connections, and these meaningful connections can be to anything, to whether it's a husband or a wife, to your friends, family, work that you love, a hobby, or even a pet that you love. Are the most important influence on being happy, on having health and well-being. So what happens when we lack connections? Well, he says we have a state of disconnectedness. And that's the state of disconnectedness that I've been talking about. And it works on so many levels. Ultimately, there's that level of spiritual disconnectedness, where you feel like you're at sea, if you will. Now, this disconnectedness feeling is an illusion. And again, coming from my perspective, it's an illusion we create so that we can discover its illusory quality and discover our continued connectedness. But you may need to go through this sense of disconnectedness before you remember your connectedness. And I think that's a lot of what happens in our world. So that sense of disconnectedness is what leads to, I think, any kind of drug abuse. And certainly leads to a sense, of exacerbated pain. So, one way of dealing with pain is a practice that is becoming more and more common. It's getting a lot of scientific evaluation, and even major companies, corporations, high-tech companies like Google and so forth are encouraging their employees to learn about and practice mindfulness meditation. So we're going to talk about mindfulness meditation. There's been a lot of research. One of the best websites to go for information about this and classes is out of UCLA. It's the UCLA Mindfulness Awareness Research Center, or MARC for short. And their website is marc.ucla.edu. And it gives you information on the research that has been going on regarding mindful awareness. On their website, they define mindful awareness as paying attention to present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with what is. It is an excellent antidote to the stresses of modern times. It invites us to stop, breathe, observe, and connect with one's inner experience. This is this stepping back that I talk about at the beginning of each show I do, and taking a look at things from that higher perspective. Direct your eye right inward, and you'll find 1,000 regions in your mind yet undiscovered. Travel them, and be expert in home cosmography. That's a quote from Henry David Thoreau. It's also on this MARC website. Their mission is to foster mindful awareness across the lifespan through education, research, and promoting well-being and a more compassionate society. So the MARC Center offers classes. Now, if you happen to live in California, you can get to those classes. That's great. But if you don't, they also have audio guided meditations in mindfulness and different aspects of that, which you can listen to for free. And this being such a growing movement, if you just do a search for mindfulness or mindful meditations, I'm sure that you'll find something somewhere close to you where you could attend a class, or you can just read and learn about it. Again, it's that opening yourself up to the present moment and being with what is without judgment of it. And that's the thing, as I said, that's where the step back takes place. Because when you're judging something, when you're in emotional turmoil about something, you can't be with it for just what it is. If you're trying to figure out what it is, if you're terrified of it, or you're loving it and wanting more, but you don't know how to get more, all of those things take you out of just being with it. And knowing that everything is emanating sort of from the same creative impulse that is you helps you not to judge so harshly or to judge incorrectly. We're always looking for, the good, bad, happy, sad dichotomy. Stepping back takes you out of that and allows you to be in the moment aware, and connected. Going back to that connectedness sense. So that's the Mark website. We'll return to talking about that, certainly in shows. I've talked about Mark before. But again, it's been a while, so these things bear repeating. So again, as I say, you can get free guided meditations that are geared to specific situations. For instance, they have a breathing meditation. Breathing is the most essential thing we can do for peace of mind. We often forget how to do that. There's meditation instructions. There's meditation for working with difficulties. There's a body and sound meditation. So they're all available at the UCLA website, mark.ucla.edu. Go check it out. So now I want to talk about the 4 happiest places in the world. This is according to an article from the Reader's Digest, and why they're considered to be such. And it comes from a book called Thrive, Finding Happiness the Blue Way, by a man named Dan Buettner. And he set out to find the happiest places on earth. And there are 4 that he considers to be 4 of the happiest on 4 different continents. And his evaluation is that what makes the residents in these places so happy has nothing to do with their material wealth or their intelligence or their attractiveness. Instead, he found that the members of these communities, and they come from Denmark and Mexico and all over the world, they give priority to social networks and health and well-being above all. There we go. There's that connectedness. And they make choices that reflect those values. So if you're looking for a cheery destination, here's some spots you might want to go. Singapore is, according to him, one of the happiest places on earth. Now, it also has one of the highest population densities in the world. And people in Singapore are known for working really hard. But they consider themselves to be quite happy because of the cleanliness and safety of their city. According to this, their subways are pristine and always arrive on time. They have police that are seen as helpful and neighborly and good at their jobs. And they feel connected to their neighbors. And then there's a quote here from Ahmad Abbas, who's a lawyer from Singapore, who says that we used to live in fishing villages where we pulled together to help each other. If something happens to a Malay household, the whole Malay community will be there to lend support. Connectedness. Aarhus, Denmark. They're considered to be one of the happiest places on earth. And they cheerfully part with, and this is really important for the United States, particularly Republicans, to understand, 68% of their income is cheerfully parted with in taxes, knowing that in return they will be guaranteed free health care, free daycare for their children, and top-notch education. 300,000 people live in this city. And they have a vibrant cultural scene, many religions, and lots of seaside. It's a beautiful country. There's a quote from a man named Jürgen Carlson, a school headmaster, who says that we believe that a rich person's not necessarily the one with a lot of money. It's the one who really has a lot to be grateful for. The nature, the company of other people, the ability to enjoy a good book. San Luis Obispo, California, one of the happiest places on earth. I'll be darned. According to this book, those residents are more likely than other U.S. cities to smile and experience joy, and less likely to experience pain or depression. Lots of volunteers, apparently. 11,000 nonprofit organizations. They have short commutes. Well, that certainly takes a lot of pressure off of your daily existence if you aren't having to commute and deal with frustrating traffic tie-ups. Business signs unobtrusive. Fewer than 11% of the residents smoke. The lowest rate in the United States, and there are lots of bike lanes and free concerts. Okay, well, that's nice. In Monterrey, Mexico. Now, these people don't have high household incomes or access to good health care, but they have a profound sense of gratitude for the new political freedom they've found since their oppressive institutional revolutionary party lost power in 2000, the first time in nearly a century. And they emphasize, guess what they emphasize? Social life, i.e. connectedness, over work. The American system is good for productivity, but not for the soul, says Miguel Basanes, a political scientist who lives in Monterrey, Mexico. And another reason Monterrey residents might be so happy is their faith in God and family and their ability to tough it out through bad times. We laugh at sickness, poverty, and even death. We even have a holiday to celebrate death. Well, of course, in Mexico, they celebrate the Day of the Dead on November 2nd, one of the biggest holidays of the year. And, in this country, that's what Halloween ought to be. My consideration, in my opinion. Instead of all of this, controversy about, Halloween, promoting devil worship and all that. Halloween promotes, Halloween is our Day of the Dead and, ghosts and all of that stuff. Anyway, let me not get into that. Let me just briefly talk about Mr. Ricard, Matthew Ricard. He is a PhD in molecular genetics, and he abandoned his scientific career and took up Tibetan Buddhism and lives in the Himalayas, and he's considered to be the happiest man in the world by the popular media. There's been books written about it and so forth and so on. He was a subject in a study performed at the University of Wisconsin on happiness, and he scored significantly above the average of hundreds of volunteers. And he is a strong advocate of meditation, and actually co-authored a study on the brains of people who meditated for a long time, and is a board member of something called the Mind and Life Institute, devoted to collaborative research between scientists and Buddhist scholars and meditators to study the impact that things like mindfulness, meditation have on our brains. In this transition era, maybe we're waking up to the idea that happiness isn't exactly what we've been led to believe, and that happiness is within all of us. Happiness is the realization of our connectedness, our oneness. And when we remember that, I guess we're happy. So that's it, another show. Stay connected, be happy, hope to see you or hear from you next time.